Today we are talking about the delivery of the second Philippic of my favorite, Cicero. Hi, my name is Moray. I am a real woman doing real anti-AI content. We're talking real history, and today we're talking about my personal favorite statesman of all time, Cicero and the second Philippic. I've been rewatching HBO's Rome with Purefoy as Mark Antony. There's a famous scene of the second Philippic where a messenger relays the second Philippic to Mark Antony, and Mark Antony has quite the reaction. Many people think of Cicero as the Stoic orator who said things with his chest and has this reputation as being the man who had to be killed so he could be defeated. You know, he was prescribed by Octavian. But actually, we're realizing that Cicero was quite what we would define now as the original keyboard warrior. His most famous work, the second Philippic, which I'm gonna delve into because it's full of hilarity in my opinion. He drags Mark Antony, he drags him. It was actually written by a pamphlet, as the Americans call it. It was actually written in leaflet form and distributed when Mark Antony was away and Cicero was hiding in a villa. We need to talk about it because you think of Cicero as being this courageous man who stood for his republic, but actually he was kind of the coward. Or maybe we're going to answer the question, was he actually a coward or actually hiding for his safety? That's another issue we're going to be discussing in this video. But we are going to speak heavily about the second Philippic, okay? So let's dive into it. Let's dive into what the Philippics are if you haven't watched any of our videos before or don't know much about Cicero. Okay, so the Philippics are a series of 14 speeches by Cicero, or attributed to Cicero. They galvanized the Roman Senate against Mark Antony, who was Cicero's enemy after such.
Round two, fight!
Cicero had framed himself as the modern defender of the Roman Republic. And Cicero had a reputation with the Catiline conspiracy. He was a skilled orator. He was really scared that Antony was going to be the new tyrant in Rome, compared to someone like Catiline, who he had defeated. Cicero believed that Antony had to be destroyed, and the total elimination of Antony could be done via speeches and writing. The Philippics were created in the immediate aftermath of Julius Caesar's death in the Ides of March, and Cicero was not part of the conspiracy against Caesar. Actually, Cicero was quite team Caesar. He kept his distance from Caesar. Cicero was very worried about Mark Antony becoming someone like Catiline because Cicero had defended the Republic and had quelled conspiracies before. And Mark Antony was just giving dictator, as we say. He was just, there were signs. Who knew that love was the thing that would break Mark Antony in the end with Mark Antony and Cleopatra, right? But at the time, Mark Antony had a powerful wife, Fulvia, who I talk about a lot. And all the signs were there that Mark Antony was going to break the Republic. It was actually Octavian who was going to create an empire, and Mark Antony would be broken by love. Cicero had this decision to break out into a rhetorical war on September the 5th, 44 BCE. Antony wants to deify Caesar. Cicero was absent from this meeting. We know from letters to Atticus and from Petrarch's discovery of letters to Atticus that Cicero did have a lot of personal engagements, but also he was quite an ill man. Antony was really angry that Cicero did not turn up. Cicero, on September the 2nd, then turns up the next day and delivers a speech against Antony. It's quite a moderate speech. It regards Antony's legislation, and Antony's gonna be challenged. He's really mad, so on September the 19th, he responds to Cicero's quite moderate speech with pure vitriol. So Antony's kind of the one who started all this. Cicero knows that all gloves are off, and Antony is after him. So he plays Antony at his own game and writes the second Philippic. This was a piece of work that was incredibly lengthy and intense, but also it was not orally delivered by Cicero because of how risky it was. And what makes this worse is that it was done behind Antony's back. Antony was not in Rome at the time. Cicero composes it as a literary pamphlet, so his friend Atticus had a lot of resources. Cicero was a novus homo, a new man. And Cicero, with Atticus's resources, distributes this pamphlet. This speech is crafted to the hilt. He describes Antony as foaming at the mouth. I mean, it's going to be full of insults we're going to dive into, and then we're going to dive into why Cicero distributed it in pamphlet. He describes Antony as foaming at the mouth, being incredibly pale, As an anemic, I would agree. He alludes to how threatened he feels by Antony. And this second Philippic is launched as like a political manifesto. With the first Philippic, Cicero was being moderate. His emotions were very guarded, but Antony had all the gloves off for Cicero, and Cicero is just like, F it. And because Antony was in Mutina at the time of the pamphlet's distribution, it burns a lot of bridges. We can see in Ad Atticum that Cicero did not write this speech out of pure emotion. He was really anxious about actually sending it out. He remains in hiding for much of 44 BCE because Antony's reach is wide, and Cicero was waiting for that moment that Antony would be away. However, Cicero's courage grows, and we can see that in the third and fourth Philippics. But let's talk about the content of the second Philippic because I've spent a lot of time laughing at it. Cicero turns Antony from a member of the Senate into a subhuman monster through this speech. He frames Antony's character as decay. What Cicero's doing in his speech is showing the moral decay of Mark Antony, and he begins with a teenage Antony. At the start of the speech, Cicero claims that Antony was groomed, pimped, and insolvent, that Antony was a toy boy and a male prostitute. He gives Antony victim complex. Antony wants to portray himself as this masculine character without weakness. And that's how media portrays him, right? With his love affair with Cleopatra. To hear that Antony was subservient and effeminate and the one who got penetrated was a total blow to his character. Cicero uses praeteritio. He skips over the scandalous details, alludes to them. One of the most famous moments of the speech is Antony in the Lupercalia festival, who is portrayed as a sitting consul, naked, anointed, and drunk. Drunk Antony at the Lupercalia festival places a diadem on Julius Caesar's head, and he's portrayed as a willing slave and wannabe kingmaker for even trying to do that. Cicero then starts to refer to Antony with slurs, permanently intoxicated, and he has emetic tendencies, aka he vomits all the time. He says that Antony is he alludes to the fact that Antony is a drunk, always in public assemblies, and alluding to the fact that Antony can't even govern his own body, how could he govern the Senate? And even though Antony and Cicero had ties after what happened at Brundisium, he argues that a favor from a gangster doesn't count, that Antony is nothing to him, because it was a favor from a gangster. So he's reclassifying Antony as a common criminal. Then we have Fulvia's involvement in this speech. Fulvia was a very rare thing for a woman in the late Roman Republic. Lots of money, lots of influence. She had the rights, more or less, of a man. But Cicero implies that Fulvia killed her ex-husbands and that she is a fatal omen. And usually, you know, now in our day, we would see that as being a femme fatale or a baddie. But when women, in a time when women didn't have rights, that wasn't very good. He even suggests that Fulvia owes a third payment to the Roman Republic, the death of Antony. He says that Fulvia's bedroom is where deeds are done. The future of Rome should not be colluded in a woman's bedroom. Another thing, he suggests that Antony is Fulvia's domina. Fulvia is the boss, and if you haven't studied any of Rome, well, let me tell you what an insult that is. So Cicero and Atticus, who were close friends, Atticus, very rich man, he had access to a very large press, a printing press. And that printing press, well, the printing press, as we know, wasn't invented, but his printing press, I'm using that to him as a metaphor, it was access to a lot of papyrus and a lot of slaves to rewrite Cicero's work. And what I find interesting about Atticus is that Atticus was meant to be very neutral, but we can see in letters that Atticus is helping Cicero review drafts of the Phillipics. So how neutral really are you, Atticus? Now, when this piece of work was released, Cicero was terrified, he was in hiding. The whole goal of this second Philippic is that arguing for peace to build the Republic back up after the death of Caesar is impossible with someone like Antony. And he was right, you know? And Cicero actually succeeds in his goal. This speech caused the Senate to declare Antony as a public enemy. And the Senate mobilizes an army against Antony at the Battle of Mutina. But if you know classics, as you know, Cicero's death was imminent, and the second triumvirate, Octavian, Lepidus, Anthony, Cicero was the first on the proscriptions list. As Mary Beard likes to say, as the story goes, it was Fulvia who was delighted with Cicero's capture because she takes his head on her knees, spits at Cicero's face, and takes a hairpin out and puts her hairpin in his tongue. Like, you can't talk anymore, can you? But one thing I want to note, because this is all alleged, and whilst a lot of these speeches are published after Cicero's death, a lot of people think that Cicero was the good guy. Anthony, who is more well known for his love affairs with people like Cleopatra now, it's funny because he actually, pop culture turned Anthony into what Cicero said he was, which was like a simp, a playboy for strong women. But the question for me is, how much did Cicero actually exaggerate to make Cicero look morally superior? Even though Cicero was seen as one of the goodies of the Roman Republic because he didn't go out killing people, he was kind of very into his investigations and conspiracy quelling and all that kind of thing. He wasn't grandiose in the way that he spoke, unlike Caesar, who we can see exaggerates pretty much everything. With the invasion of Gaul. How much did Cicero actually exaggerate of this time? We will never know. This is why we need a time machine, okay? We need a time machine. I need to find out what Fulvia's hairpin looked like when she stabbed Cicero. If she stabbed Cicero. Because that's the biggest question I have as somebody who works in fashion and loves classics. What we do think, because it's not what we do know, it's what we do think, because we will never know, is that Cicero published this pamphlet and he wasn't the strong orator that pop culture seems to deem him as. He was a man who was ill, as we would say a lot of the time. He'd probably be on NHS waiting lists if he was in the UK and using a lot of AI to calm him, his reassurances. It is a very normal reaction in the Roman Republic to be sick, but Cicero, we know, was sick from letters to Atticus. Talk about how people think he delivered these strong speeches, and no, he didn't. He had a rich friend and spent a lot of time in villas. That character assassination where he had to call Anthony drunk, the character assassination of Anthony that he had to deliver via writing so the Senate would declare Anthony as an enemy of the state. It was delivered via pamphlet, and realistically, Cicero didn't have the courage. Because he could have like stood up and said it with his chest, but he didn't. But I just wanted to dispel this kind of myth that Cicero was a brave, older, stoic man, was very good at speeches when he wasn't. He spent a lot of time hiding and feeling terrified and feeling suicidal because the Cicero was constantly suicidal if you look at the letters to Atticus. The question is whether we would define Cicero as being like a modern keyboard warrior. So yes, that was the second Philippic. I will, my editor, I will show her some of my favorite parts of the second Philippic, but it is long, Gigi, it is long. He spent a lot of anger doing this and then spent most of his time hiding from doing this, so yeah. Anyway, sorry. Thank you for watching today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.